Hey, it's Stefan. Welcome back to the game room.
Connecting one.
I decided to try to keep everything off behind me because the signs are really loud when they're on, and the last video the audio was just killing me. So today I'm super excited to finally show you the gameplay counselor panel that I moderated at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo in 2019. As a preface, over the last year or so, I've been really focusing my collection efforts on internal Nintendo employee memorabilia. That journey, of course, yielded many new friendships. So I was able to organize a Nintendo gameplay counselor panel to go along with my museum display. I invited 4 amazing gameplay counselors to the panel: Casey Pelkey, Tom Christensen, Yvette Kirby Waters, and James Waters. We had an amazing time, and I got a whole lot of really good feedback. A lot of people told us that this was the best panel at the show. It went so well that Portland has asked us back next year, so look for our panel in 2020 as well. Couple things to go over before we start. First, this is a 45-minute panel, so get comfortable. Second, all of this footage was captured by Hans Ruder, I hope I'm saying your name right, and is being used with his permission. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. Third thing, the audio is not great. Fortunately, my podcast co-host Tyler was gracious enough to edit for me. You should absolutely follow his channel too, and I'll leave a link in the description. Lastly, I couldn't tell from the stage, but the audio for the question portion is especially bad. Most of the time you can't really hear what they're saying, so I'll just subtitle the video when I have to. That just about does it. Enjoy the panel. Hi everybody. Welcome to the Nintendo Gameplay Counselor reunion. My name is Stefan Reese. I'm co-host of the Collector's Quest podcast. I don't know if anybody woos. Yeah, all right. But aside from that, I'm just a really passionate collector of gameplay counselor memorabilia, and that's sort of my mission for the last year has been really trying to like evangelize and popularize kind of the gameplay counselor scene, in that like Nintendo doesn't tend to popularize anything that they can't monetize, right? So there's just this huge piece of Nintendo history that not a terrible amount of people know a whole lot about. Like, they knew these lovely people existed, and that was kind of it. So if you haven't been to the museum downstairs, please go. I drove 16 hours with all that garbage downstairs to show it to you. So please go. But without further ado, I have 4 original Nintendo gameplay counselors that I would love to introduce. Just to my right here is Casey Pelkey. Tom Christensen. Who's next? Yvette Waters / Kirby? What do you want to say?
Kirby Waters.
Okay. And James Waters. So, they were cheap because they're married and I got to put them in the same hotel room. So, first of all, this was something that how many of you know what the power line is? Okay, how many of you called the power line? These are your people. These are your people.
Any of them.
So surprisingly, and I guess it's not surprising because there is like a generational gap, right? We have a whole like maturing generation of people who grew up with the internet, which the internet, I think, killed your job. So, because downstairs when I was looking, or when I was presenting the exhibit, I got a lot of like, oh, is this like development stuff? What's going on here? And I'm like, no, it's from the call center. And then they're like, their eyes glaze over, and I'm like, oh, you don't know what a call center is. Or like the younger kids were like, I don't understand why they didn't just Google it. So I guess, Tom, you and I were talking about this the other night. You weren't sure whether or not people would actually know what it was you did. So you want to take a stab at explaining to people what a gameplay counselor actually did?
Sure. So, back in the day, as Stefan's mentioning, pre-internet, playing a game, playing a Nintendo game, playing a Nintendo licensed game, and you get stuck, right? We're all gamers. You get stuck playing a game. And it's like, okay, what do I do now? So, of course, Nintendo is like, in their infinite wisdom, open up this, again, Stefan mentioned the call center. So, we have this cubicle farm of us counselors sitting around And yeah, the job, to be fair, it was advertised as, I believe I still have the want ad back in the days of classified ads. How would you like to get paid to play video games for a living? And that was the no BS ad, right? So I was like, oh, well, that sounds pretty cool. So, they hire us and they bring us in and they train us, phone etiquette, things like that. But of course, what's the primary job is tech support for games. Hey, I'm playing Legend of Zelda. I'm lost in this palace. What do I do? And then we go from there. So.
Does anyone so how did you find, so you answered an ad, is that what you were saying? Essentially the ad. Does anybody else have a varying story that they'd like to tell about how they discovered their job as a gameplay counselor?
Well, I can say that I did answer an ad. I'm one of the French bilingual gameplay counselors. So is there anybody in here from Canada who called the French line? There was a French line and a Spanish line. So we handled all of North America and sometimes Europe. And the Nintendo posted an ad for French speakers. Previous game experience not required, just you needed to be able to speak French. And I needed a job. And so I applied, and when I got hired, the only game I had ever played, I just told them this, honest to God, was Tetris on Game Boy. And so it was a crash course in playing these games, and basically having to, by the end of training, I had to finish Final Fantasy II, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, and Dragon Warrior 4. And I was honest to God scared that I was going to lose this cush job because I couldn't beat Ganon. So, but so it was, but the ad said French speaker, not, it's like we can teach you the games, you just have to speak French.
Casey, I think were you gonna say something?
Oh, I mean, I joined Nintendo in 1989. I was still in high school, and I was working for a company named Lumbermans, and I was stocking shelves for $2.75 an hour, and cleaning restrooms when the truckers were done. And it was, it was my school job, right? And I saw an ad in the paper, and everybody really started on a temp agency. Nintendo started with temps, and then you had to prove yourself to go to a full-time employee. But I remember meeting with the temp agency, and they said that we'll start you out at $8 an hour, and my jaw hit the floor. And they said, here's a Nintendo system, go home, play these games, and you'll come back and you'll take a test. So I actually had 30 days to play games, and came back and took the test, and the rest was history. We did a lot of training actually as well. So you had to play, I think, close to 300 games before you went on the phone. But everything was done by memory and book. We wrote down everything, so we didn't have computers or anything like that. So, but for that kind of money, I was in Fat City, got a brand new Toyota Corolla, and by brand new, I mean it was about 13 years old, but it was awesome.
I mean, speaking of the memory retention, I think I've seen a clip of it's a counselor playing Duck Hunt while on a call, walking someone through Final Fantasy. And that just blows my mind. So one thing I just want to pause there, I meant to ask this first. I think for a lot of you, at least starting out, you were kind of expecting this maybe be a summer job or just something that was just another milestone in your long careers. We basically filled this room today. What is it like knowing people care so much about something that maybe you didn't expect at the time would, like, you're sitting here, but so many years later, like, what's it like knowing that this many people care?
Trippy.
It's awesome. Metal Jesus, he did a video about probably 2 or 3 years ago where he found one of the old manuals, our gameplay counselor, like a blue book, which we use to have all of our maps. And I had authored a lot of those maps, and so he called out my name, and my Facebook request just blew up, and it was super, super cool because people were so friendly, and you never really think about it. When you're doing it, you really don't think that this is what I'm going to do. And it did start out as just a summer job. And then they said, hey, we'll cover your college if you go to college. And so I thought, all right, I worked there for 18 years. Thank you.
I do talking expectation. It is always funny to me because, as I'm gathering things for the exhibit that you guys saw downstairs, I'll talk to gameplay counselors, and as they're handing me something that we've agreed upon, they go, I have no idea why you want this. Right? And, it's like this half-off coupon for a restaurant that doesn't exist anymore. And there's stuff like that I'm super into, or half a box of their old business cards. So it is fascinating to me that there's still, I love that everyone cares. And like I said, I drove that collection 16 hours to you so you could see it. And I love that I'm just so thrilled. There's been a year of my life finding this. So I'm so thrilled that so many of you are into it. So thank you. I wanted to ask kind of a general, worst, best, funniest, whatever calls, if you guys have stories like that. But particularly first, I wanted to talk about Dragon Warrior a little bit. I don't know, I'm sure many of you know, that at one point in time, they basically gave a copy of Dragon Warrior to every single Nintendo Power subscriber. And so you just put 1 million Japanese RPGs into a demographic that had never played one in their lives. I don't know if you guys saw the display downstairs, there's a button that says, I survived Dragon Warrior, and it's got this flame coming out and hitting this dude in the face. They made those for a reason. So how crazy was it really that crazy? Were you guys going nuts? Were you sleeping under desks? What was that like?
I'm looking at Casey because that was a little before my time.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We've kind of tried to reminisce a little bit about it. I think that the setup for the giveaway, trying to package it all and mail them, was the real crazy part. From a gameplay counselor standpoint, we did get a lot of calls, but they were very trivial. I'm at the beginning of the game and I just don't even know what to do, and it's just beat slimes all day. Just keep doing that until your level gets bigger, and just keep doing it, and then they'll become easier, and just keep doing it, and you'll do that for about 10, 15 hours, and then move to the next area, and they're like, okay. So I mean, not a lot of super detailed stuff. I mean, certainly an increase in call volume, but I think that the big push definitely was just trying to mail. They underestimated what it would take. And so really it was everybody in the company at every level. We were putting games in boxes and shipping them out. And so that was a real survival part of that.
And there was, Stephen mentioned, a bunch of brand new fan base, audience, playing a new genre of games, and where maybe before they were just used to, action type games, and now all of a sudden they're playing this menu driven game. And yeah, one of the calls that I remember taking was from a frustrated game player, and he's like, okay, so I'm, I guess I'm in the basement of the castle or something like that, and I don't know how to get out. And it's like, well, you have to go over to the stairs. And I don't remember what button you had to press, but you have to press a button to bring up the menu, and there's stairs on the menu. And you select stairs, and you can go up the stairs. Well, I did that, and I'm just not going anywhere. And so, and that was, I think, one of the disconnects for us is when you're talking to somebody who's playing a game, but you can't see exactly what they're doing, and they're saying they're doing what you're telling them to do, but that's not the case, then that's definitely leads on frustration on both ends. But eventually you figure out, okay, process of elimination, was this guy maybe just not standing, facing the right square or on the square or whatever it was, but eventually you Q&A and you narrow it down and you help them out. So some interesting calls.
So, Yvette.
Yes.
Before we move on to if anyone has an interesting call story to tell, I wanted to address briefly, we talked about this right before. So you were working at Nintendo in the 90s and your last name was Kirby.
Yes.
You wanna talk a little bit about what that was like?
Well, okay, yeah. Kirby is my maiden name, and now it's my middle name. But at the time I got hired, I was Yvette Kirby, and again, I'd only ever played Tetris. I learned to love video games at Nintendo. And I didn't know anything about Kirby or Kirby's Dream Land or any of that. But I found out really fast. Yeah, there's, I think, at least one of the, Nintendo of America would name the conference rooms after games. So you would say, okay, I've got a meeting this afternoon in Dragon Warrior or in Kirby's Dreamland, Kirby's Adventure. And then so, yeah, my cubicle, I got a lot of shit, I would say, basically, from people. Yeah, yeah. And then, yeah, so all of the years that I was a gameplay counselor, I was at Nintendo for 9 years, 5 years as a gameplay counselor, and then went over to Nintendo Technology Development, and that's when James and I got married, so my name changed. Anyway, but Kirby, that's who I was there.
Any advice for incoming president Doug Bowser?
Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah, Bowser was another one, yes. Exactly. I won't tell you the rude jokes about sucking.
That completely derailed me. I'm sorry. I was going along just fine, and then if it gets dirty, and I'm just like, what?
Can we talk about being a woman in the gameplay industry in the 1990s?
Yes. Yes, we can.
No, I don't mean to sidetrack.
No,
anyone,
do it.
But,
I told you I'm not going to stop you. Go.
well, no, all I would want to say is that it's so pleasing to me today to see so much more awareness about these things. It was hard, you know, I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was sometimes in a call center that was really large like that. And everybody was like 30 or under. It was a bit like a dorm or a frat house, sorority house kind of thing sometimes, especially during Hell Week between Christmas and New Year's. When everybody was calling because they'd all gotten new systems. And, but there were some things about, there were a lot of women gameplay counselors. Obviously we were really drastically outnumbered. And I would say that in general, I didn't really have any issues with my coworkers. Like they were pretty good. I did have some issues, some of the things that women deal with when you're trying to climb a ladder in a business anywhere. Certain assumptions. When I went to Nintendo Technology Development, I was the only woman in a group of 22 engineers. And for 4 years, that was really hard. But that's going to be a different story for another day and another panel. Anyway.
We're just going to make the panel longer. I'm sorry, we're hearing the story.
Yeah. No, I mean, a lot of progress has been made in 25 years. And the progress is still being made. But it was a lot of fun, and we had a lot of good times, and you have to just learn to laugh off the sucking jokes. Yeah. To keep your job. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay. So I'd like to start talking about, one of the biggest things, I've done some like informal polling and people who like would want to ask you guys questions, and almost all of it was like, what's the best call? What's the worst call? What's the most awkward call? I mean, I think we can all kind of address this together. Does anybody want to start off? James, I would love to put you on the spot if you have a call you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, probably one of the best calls is when you get calls from the really little kids. And there's usually a couple of common questions that are really, really great. And probably the best one is, what's Mario doing and can I talk to him?
Oh my.
So those are probably the best calls. And a lot of the kids, they're really polite. They're fun to talk to. And of course, Nintendo had the pat answer of, he's working on his new game and he's really busy right now. Can I tell you more about what we're about to release that he's in? So kind of priming
you
the market.
Upsold the little kids, James? That is not. Man. Anyone else?
So, yeah, that was probably the funnest call. The next one I'd probably mention was a little bit off the subject of gameplay, but is that we've talked about Hell Week a couple times. But that morning after Christmas when somebody calls and they're really frustrated and you get the system hooked up and you hear the logo go on and the noise behind them in the phone just erupts and their whole day is made because now the Nintendo is working, and before they thought it was broken. And that's the best
Aw.
feeling ever.
That is the best feeling. That's awesome.
Yeah, just to elaborate on that. So a lot of people don't know that in the call center, in the beginning, they felt like there were two types of employees. There were gamers and then there were tech people. And the tech people did customer service. They helped people get the system up and running, and the gameplay counselors helped with just gameplay. But then they started to realize as the call center grew, and at one point we were at least 400, that you could cross-train. And then that became a game. So you could become an advanced super agent. So that's something that when you see in the museum, some of the jackets and stuff, people would, proudly wear the status, that they got. And we got lots of little trinkets to kind of showcase that. And so we got to see both sides of both gameplay and customer service. And during Hell Week that James talked about, that's where you would work just 12-hour shifts, just taking calls and helping people set up, trying to explain what an RF adapter looks like. And for anyone who knows back then, an RF adapter, most people would never understand that that's how you hook up a TV, coax cable. And we used to describe it back then because it was politically okay as like it was the size of a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah.
And that this will never fly now, so.
Hey, 5-year-old Billy. It's about the yeah.
To the parents, to the little kid, it was a bar of soap. We all had ways to describe it.
Yeah.
Or a deck of cards.
Before we go on, you said 400?
Yeah, we had
call center?
I think at peak we had around 400 employees in the call center.
Yeah.
I mean, they built an entire building just dedicated to the call center.
So that's amazing.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to talk about calls?
There was that period in the late 80s, early 90s with the whole console wars, right? Sega versus Nintendo, and the evil empire and the upstart and everything. And I think it would just, in the course of a day, just every now and then you get a random call where, some kid is like, Nintendo sucks, or something like that,
Like a
click.
prank call? Like, Nintendo sucks, click.
This was when the call was free.
Okay.
As soon as it became a toll call, we didn't get those calls. Trolling when it costs doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then, or the other guys who were looking to, engage you in a debate at some level, right? And so they go, oh yeah, well, Sega has blast processing, how about that? And, we were trained, it was a customer service job, so, it's not like you go, well, screw you, kid, or something like that. Were we thinking it? Oh, yes. Yeah, we were thinking it. But,
So if you're in this room,
on the phones, we had to present our, corporate faces. But, amongst the counselors, it eventually, came to be that's like, well, has anyone ever pushed back on one of these guys and said, well, can you explain to me what is blast processing? and then you get the silence or just the,
Or
well,
they hang up.
yeah, Nintendo sucks, So yeah, there was definitely that, the console wars, we definitely had our fun at that, while that was going on too.
funny.
Yeah.
Did you ever have people, speaking of console wars, did you ever have people wanting support for Sega product?
Oh, yes.
Like not
Yes.
understanding?
Yeah, I had I still remember this call because I was still kind of in training, and they have this time period where you're sort of, got training wheels and your lead is listening in on your calls and, helping you if you get stuck. And I remember this lady called in and she sounded very nice, but she needed help with a Sega Genesis that was broken. And I was explaining to her that she needed to call Sega. She said she didn't know how to call Sega, and I said I didn't know how to call Sega either. So she's like, well, can't you just fix this? And I'm like, I wish I could. No, we can't. And then she got really, really testy, and I was kind of surprised at how angry she was. And she just blamed us that, you're all the same company anyway. And I was like, wow, okay. That was my introduction to the console wars. Was shortly after getting hired. This would have been 1992. Yeah.
I know yesterday we were talking about a repeat caller that you were going to talk about. Did you want to talk about? Or James is nodding his head. He knows what I'm
We
talking
weren't
about.
going to mention names, but we did
Right.
have some callers who You know, they played a lot of games. They really liked Nintendo. Maybe they were bored. It was an 800 number. Even the 206 direct line number was just a straight long distance call to Seattle area. And so sometimes you would get some people who would just call and call. Honestly, I think it was like early trolling in those days, but they would call and call and call and call. And
just want to talk to you?
just want to talk or ask questions or try to get gameplay help on the customer service side, on the 800 line. And there were, especially when we got really busy and the resources got trimmed back a little bit in terms of who could answer calls and stuff. Nintendo, I remember, certainly we had to do this on the French line, had to block a couple of phone numbers. And just, unfortunately, I mean, we sent letters to, this is a kid in Canada, sent letters to his family and said, you're going to have to kind of cease and desist because there's only, there'd be maybe 3 French speakers available at a time. And when you're really busy, you had to, get through these calls really quick. So, but this kid was really smart. He'd go and he'd call from somebody else's phone. And so, and also because we were such a small team, and there were so few of us, we got to know everybody pretty well. So,
you had a small team, but on the American line, we had upwards of 300, 400 people at some point. But there was like one in particular, again, no names, no shame, and it's like he would war dial Nintendo, and you'd get a call, and after a while, you'd recognize the voice, or he'd give you his name, and you'd know who he was. And so there ended up being this kind of side effect of what people now call prairie dogging, where you'd get a call and you'd hang up the phone and you'd stand up and say, blah, blah, blah is calling again, just to see. And a couple minutes later, you'd hear it over there, and then over there, and then over there. And it was always the same game. And while you were looking up the information for this question he would ask, he would then start talking about it in detail. So he was a really big fan, so you didn't really want to shut him down, because these are great people who are really enjoying the game, but they just wanted to talk more and more about their favorite game. So, we answered the question as best we could, said thanks, got to go to the next call, and we'd hang up, and they just keep calling for like an hour, and then it would go quiet, and it would happen a couple times a month. Just really loved the game.
So I want to get to some questions here, but Yvette, before, and I'm sorry for picking on you, but you're so interesting. You were cross-trained on correspondence, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit like what correspondence is versus GPC, and like maybe the difference in those two roles?
Sure. Like, well, as Casey said, in the early days of Nintendo Call Center, the gameplay counselors were the gameplay counselors, and then they started bringing in and training people in customer service, and then started cross-training everybody to do these jobs. One of the things that Nintendo was very proud of during that time period and pushed for was Nintendo of America answered every single customer letter that came in to the company. And a lot of those letters were to Nintendo Power with the envelope art, probably a lot of you remember. If you ever did send a letter to Nintendo and get a reply back, that was my team who answered it back. And we had a huge, by this time, we'd gotten through our MS-DOS days and we're on Windows 3.1. And we had, the correspondence team had developed a letter library where we had stock responses for common questions like when is Mortal Kombat coming out, things like that, and why is there no blood?
Fix your game.
It's sweat. Just telling you now. Anyway, so we, one of the things, again, it being a call center and during the busy periods, like Tom said, you're taking well over 100, possibly 200 calls a day, just going and going. We would have projects providing, updating the electronic manual, ELMO, with gameplay information and customer service information, and then also answering letters. And these were opportunities for us to take a break from the phones. If anybody's ever worked a phone job, you know what I mean. Anyway, and so we built up these letter libraries, and we would answer gameplay calls. We would answer customer service calls through there. And you had to take a test, a writing test, to make it into correspondence. But once you did, then you were basically level 5, and that was advanced super agent. Super agent is you're completely cross-trained in customer service and gameplay. Advanced super agent is you're doing all of that in writing as well as on the phones. And that was pretty cool. We got to pick the envelopes for Nintendo Power when envelope art came in. There was beautiful stuff that came in.
I love how they even like gamified giving you more work.
They
Like,
did.
We want to give you more work, but now you're a super agent.
Advanced.
Here's a trophy.
It's true. You're at the next level.
That's right. Did anyone I want to start taking some questions, but did anyone want to talk about any more calls before we go on? Casey sounds like he's got something.
No, I don't.
Specifically something you don't want to talk about, I see.
No, we
Okay,
all had calls, but that's all right.
Questions? I saw plaid guy right there. That's you, yes.
First off, thanks for everything you did. I never called, but I was reading Nintendo Power, and you all contributed that, and I just thought that was something nice to do for propaganda and Nintendo advertising. My question is about, and I don't know if this goes too far back for some of you, but it's the hardware side, loading the cartridges and because I know we weren't really supposed to blow in them. I've learned later what we all did, but like, I'm curious what y'all noticed people doing that was crazy or don't do that or things like that.
Yeah, that was one of the customer service, one of the first things you learn in customer service training is one of the tech calls is, my cartridge doesn't work. And I tried blowing in it. I tried, a Q-tip and rubbing alcohol, all of these different things. And that was our first, common response was never blow in the cartridge. Always use the Nintendo seal of approval certified cleaning kit.
Very nice.
And here, let me
Order one for you.
That's right. I saw the front here in the corner. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, speaking of that, originally when Nintendo modeled the Super Nintendo, they released, they put it for a slant, so it couldn't set anything on top of it. So the kind of the problem with the NES is that it's still together because they put them on top of it. Was that something you got called about?
About spilling in it?
Yeah, because
Why doesn't it work?
so that you couldn't set a beverage on top of the console.
The interesting thing is that we would hear about what was shipped to the company. So the tech service was below us, and they would describe machines full of candy or chips because they had doors that kids could stuff things in.
He means literally they were downstairs and we were upstairs.
Yeah, two level, building. But I don't know about them, changing the model or the form factor because of those type of things. But the person behind Nintendo, Mino Arakawa, Mr. Arakawa was so passionate about making sure fans could continue to play, because without the players, then the whole business collapses. So when we heard stuff like that, where somebody did something that was quite silly or something, his response wasn't, buy another one. His response was send them a new system, figure out how to get a new system in their hands. And that was something, and I've worked for him for over half my life, that I always will remember is that the customer is number one. And so the reason that we had 400 customer service agents, GPCs and stuff, was because he insisted that we take care of the customer. And there were so many times where we would get a call where someone was frustrated, a mom, whatever, and the flashing red light or whatever, and if we couldn't solve it, we would pay to have somebody come out to their house to get the system, to bring it back, to fix it, to send it back. So
Sounds like really rare service.
it was amazing. Yeah.
Amazon just has money to burn.
Exactly.
You in like the middle. Yep.
I used to work at sports for my country, and we were next on the other thing, and especially when you're recording, there's not as much quality there for the products and services that are offered. Not as much as what's about in-house. And so you guys sound like you did carrying that out.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, it was, it was a family. And I think we were taught early on, I mean, for me, coming out of high school and working at Nintendo was, hugely important. And I've been in the industry ever since. I've never left. And so, and working for people like Mr. Arakawa, I mean, was key to it. And I think all of us would work for him again if given the opportunity.
And
So.
no,
Yeah.
to your point, we were specifically trained and rated in terms of our performance review. You would have periodically your lead would be listening to your calls and making sure that, you're not, that you're doing your job and you're not throwing people under the bus. But we always had to say, Nintendo gameplay, this is Yvette, how may I help you? And if you didn't say that, or some variation of that, you got told. Yeah, so I mean, we were graded, if you will, on those things, and if you were going to advance to the next level, you needed to hit all your marks on your job, and that emphasis on customer service. And if you didn't know the answer, you would find out the answer. We had a whole project, the admin. I don't know if you guys did that. I did that. There was an admin team, which was, the difficult questions, the escalation problems, because obviously, every customer service department has those, where you tried to find an answer for someone. And one of the correspondence letters that I gave to Stefan is one that I wrote where I had gone around a couple of times with a young player who was really, really frustrated that there wasn't information about the Nintendo 64. This was when it was still Project Reality and it was announced, it was coming out. People were very excited. We had so many calls and letters on that. And he, accused us of lying to him and withholding information, and we weren't answering his questions. And I had to write to him back and say, and this is absolutely the truth, is the last people they were going to tell was us, because we liked this stuff, and it was our job to tell you when people called, to answer the question, if we could. So Nintendo very deliberately did not tell us things, because they didn't want it to get out yet.
They told us.
Well, you were special, yes.
You just weren't the next level.
Yeah, the next level.
Sorry, I saw you first. Yeah.
So before pre-internet, how did you have to deal with cryptic game design in terms of when you do design request, where you have to kneel in front of a stone and select the right crystal and take it to the next level. But without internet and without Nintendo power at that time, how was players going to know, or how did you guys get the word to know how to deal with that kind of situation?
Well, as you guys who have been down and seen Steph's collection, his little recreation of our cubicle and those collections of binders, the mythical green or blue binders, that was like the repository of all our gameplay information. So like as a brand new counselor, you probably haven't played, maybe you haven't played Simon's Quest yet kind of thing. But if you cracked open the manual, there's, we had maps and walkthroughs and other information for the various games. So, it was, I know I answered a lot of questions on games that I never played simply by using the maps and info that like Casey and some of the other counselors who were prolific, content creators for the game counselors. And so you use this information, and then if it was one of those cases of, I'm explaining it the best I can, but you're still not being able to accomplish whatever it is in the game, then I could always transfer you to a different, gameplay counselor who was, skilled in that game. So.
And it was the counselors who created all of those map manuals through trial and error. They just had to play them and just brute force figure them out.
You with the, yep, on the aisle. Yep, you had your hand up first. Yep, yes. Oh, I was going to ask that. So
Many.
Sorry, just because she's in the back. The question was there a game that any of you absolutely hated or dreaded getting calls about?
Adventures of Lolo 3.
A Legacy of the Wizard.
Legacy.
Legacy was probably, I mean, there were a handful of games. I mean, there were actually many games you hated getting calls about.
Almost any Koei game.
Yeah.
Aww.
Well, I mean, I liked them. They were hard because they were simulations. So
The problem was when somebody wanted to walk you through something that if they made one wrong step, you started over. And you would spend, back, especially when it was free, you would spend a couple hours on the phone with them. And, you learn patience really fast. And so, Tom mentioned earlier, you can't see what these people are doing. So you're just like, you can hear them make the wrong click and you're just like, oh gosh, reset. All right, let's do this again,
Speaking of patience, before we move on, and I think that's going to be the last questions, guys. We got to wrap up. I'm sorry. But I just want to point out, speaking of patience, all those maps, if you look at downstairs, those binders, like half of those, Casey Pelkey drew by hand.
Thank you. That was my way of being able to get off the phones. So we all tried to look for ways, projects and stuff to change the amount of time you spent on the phone, and I decided that writing content and drawing maps was the best way out.
So I just wanted to give all of you, first of all, thank you so much. Again, I meant it when I said this is like fulfilling a year-long dream of mine, that we get to be on the stage finally together and kind of share this weird piece of Nintendo history. So thank you so much. I just wanted to give each of you a minute, because we have like 3 minutes, to just say what you're doing now, if you want to promote a project. So we'll just start with Casey and go down.
Yeah, so I had the rare opportunity to leave Nintendo at the request of Mr. Arakawa to join him on a new venture in Honolulu, Hawaii, where I still live. This was in 2007, and I got to work on my very favorite title of all time, which is Tetris. And so I've been with Tetris now for 13 years. I'm the vice president and general manager. I deal with all the electronic licensing. And we have a very special person in the house, Alexei Pajanoff, creator of Tetris. So I started when I was just a little young pup with lots of hair. And I just love this industry. I love the people that I get to work with, the people that I get to meet, and I was really thankful to be able to take part of this, and appreciate the invite and all the passion that you put into it as well. And it's so great to see my old friends up on stage.
I'm currently a freelance writer, editor, but Nintendo was definitely the springboard in my gaming career. After being in the call center for about 4.5 years. I finally got the coveted promotion to product acquisition and development, otherwise known as the Treehouse. And so, I got to work on Donkey Kong Country and things like that, and do lots of incredibly fun projects. I was on Team Nintendo, so I got to travel and promote our new systems and titles. And then that experience just, led me to other stops, in my gaming career as a game designer. I worked for Microsoft. I worked for some developers, some publishers. I did a stop at Wizards of the Coast, and I was an editor on the D&D team, which was really just a hugely cool thing for me. So Nintendo definitely paved the way for my gaming career.
I would say that, Nintendo started my career in technology. Like I said, I got hired in because I spoke French. I had a career, my degree is in the humanities and social sciences, and that started me off after I went from being a gameplay counselor to advanced superagent to I was the technical editor for the Nintendo GameCube SDK. I worked for 4 years in Nintendo technology development, and after that I went to Microsoft Game Studios, where I was a tech editor. And since then, I am also a freelance consulting technology writer and editor in my day job, and I'm also the founder of Minerva Interactive, which is a small indie startup. And we're working on our first game, which we're going to demo at Geek Girl Con next month.
Yeah. James, I think she stole your thunder. You got anything to add?
Well, I can't really beat that, but I'll do what I can. Yeah, I had a lot of fun at Nintendo, and I tried to get into the Treehouse, didn't quite make it, but I did make it into the Treehouse Annex, which allowed me to officially put software or game testing on my resume, which then kicked off a career in software engineering. And so after several jobs in different places, I'm now at the University of Washington, where I still get together with people in the organization who do play games, because it's still a hobby of mine. And usually around the holidays, when it's not as busy, we bust out the Super Nintendo and pick some, Zelda, Metroid, pull out some of the favorites and play them during the free time. So.
Thank you everyone for coming. This was amazing.